This time on Millennial, we're joined by author Kacen Callender, who discusses queer representation in media.
We're so excited to see queerness more accepted, but it is a very specific kind of queerness that's very white, that's very cis, and leans into heteronormativity in a way that I think my queer communities reject.
Pro-gun advocates are just more engaged with the political process, and they are better at organizing than pro-gun reform advocates. They are better at it than we are.
So now I'm like, oh my God, what if I get summoned to court to testify and I got to go back to Tonopah, Nevada, and they're going to be like, sorry, the Comfort Inn's booked. You have to stay at the International Clown Motel.
Oh,
no! Welcome to Millennial, the home of fake adulting and gay talk. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
Happy Pride, and in just a few minutes, we're going to kick off Pride Month with an interview with author Kacen Callender, who will help us discuss LGBTQ representation in media and the increasing popularity of queer novels. They have written a couple now themselves, so we'll talk about those in a few minutes. Did you two have a nice break? We were off last week.
We actually flew up to see Mark's sister graduate from her master's program. So it was really nice to get to see that. We're so proud of her. But I know what everyone's wondering right now was my first time flying since the mask mandate was dropped. And I'm here to report that in both the airports I was in, Atlanta, Hartsfield, and BWI in Baltimore. And on both flights, mask wearing was at about 30%, would be my estimate. And people were coughing and sneezing. I could see some of the loud talkers. I could see spit coming out of their mouth. And I was like, this is just my fucking life now.
Horror music is playing in Laura's head.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, the COVID numbers just keep going up, but we're just going to pretend like that's not a thing.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, thankfully, on both flights, the person in the row with us was masked. So at least we had that, but it wasn't great, y'all.
But what about the person in front of you and behind you and to your left?
So, we got home and we waited a few days and went and got PCR tested.
Okay.
We're negative. So this is just the fucking reality we live in now, that you just have to accept if you want to go anywhere and do anything, that you have to do the best you can to stay safe and then plan to get tested when you get home. That's all we can do.
I didn't do anything as exciting as Laura did, but I took a couple day trips from where I am. Hosted a barbecue yesterday. I think I sprained my wrist trying to lift a watermelon, which is a new low for me personally.
Hashtag signs you're getting old.
Basically, yes. So I'll be calling my stepmom after we finish and just having her look up my wrist through FaceTime because she's a nurse and we have just grown up not going to the ER unless we converse with her first, because nobody's going to tell you don't need to go to the hospital more than a nurse will who's seen everything.
What is there to see over FaceTime when pointing it at a wrist? Is a bone going to pop out?
No, but I'll show her the other one. She can tell me if she agrees that it's a little bit swollen. It's not bruised, so I'm not stressing about it, but at least then she could be yeah, you should keep it wrapped for a bit or try not to lift anything with it.
Yeah. Last weekend was my birthday, and we went to Tahoe, and it was really beautiful. We had a great time, but something batshit crazy happened on the drive back. But I'm going to save the story for the end of the show, so stay tuned for that.
Before we jump into our interview with Kacen Callender, I just wanted to give a quick plug for our Patreon and specifically to shout out our latest patrons. We really wouldn't be able to do this show week after week without y'all's support. It really is the bread and butter of this show. It's what keeps us going, especially on weeks like this week where we don't have any ads. So big shout out to Laura, V, Ariel, Sarah, Rob, Jessica, Trisha, Marge, Sherry, Kristen, Megan, Courtney, Tom, and Adam. Thank you all so much for your support. And of course, thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/millennial. There is so much amazing bonus content over there. 7 or 8 years worth, actually. That's got to be thousands of hours at this
This show's
point.
getting old.
It is.
It's going to sprain a wrist picking up a watermelon soon.
Yeah. So yeah,
All that
thank y'all so
podcasting
much.
is contributing to my deteriorating bone structure.
I've had some gray hairs lately, I've noticed. That's been pretty new for me.
Is that new? I've been getting gray hair
me.
since 2016, man.
Dang. Well, we know why.
Yeah.
What happened in
I
2016.
wonder what happened.
Yeah, and just want to plug this week's After Dark. We're going to kick off a 3-part series, Get to Know the Hosts. And this week, part 1 is all about Pam. We're going to track Pam's life thus far and her career in podcasting and journalism so far. It's going to be really great. And I'm really looking forward. We've never done this before, just focused on one of the hosts for an interview. So look forward to that at patreon.com/millennial this week. Thanks, everybody. And by the way, quick plug for the After Dark from 2 weeks ago. We had a really good discussion about what goes on behind the scenes of the show and being a creator online. So don't miss that one as well. We always have these great After Darks, and then we don't promote the ones that already happened because we're already looking forward to the following After Dark. So there's a ton of great stuff, like Laura said, waiting for you at patreon.com/millennial. We are now joined by Kacen Callender, an award-winning author of novels for children, teens, and adults, including King and the Dragonflies and the best-selling novel Felix Ever After. They have a new book coming out later this year called Lark and Kassim Start a Revolution, which we will discuss in a little bit. Welcome to the show, Kacen. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we wanted to have you on to discuss LGBTQ representation in media as Pride Month gets underway. To start, can you tell us a bit about how you got started as a writer?
Yeah, I've always loved writing. When I was younger, I started out with fan fiction. I actually don't even know if it's still around. I think everyone uses AO3 these days, but fanfiction.net was my go-to.
Okay.
So I would write like queer fan fiction for a lot of anime, and I think that's where I got my first kind of reviews that were like, wow, you could probably be a professional writer if you wanted to. And I was like 10 years old at the time, but I think that really stuck with me. Yeah.
That's very fitting for our show because our roots are very steeped in fandom, and fandom is such an amazing place to explore. Did you always kind of know that when you became a published author, like in a traditional sense, that you wanted your books to feature a diverse cast of characters and diverse storytelling, or was that something that kind of came after?
Yeah, that was always my main motivation when I first started. I was reading YA, loving it, but really felt like there wasn't enough Black characters, queer characters, trans characters. I am part of a generation where we were all reading about the same YA at the same time and coming to the same conclusion that there could be a lot more diversity. And I think that I started to get published around the same time of kind of like the after effects of We Need Diverse books, where you're seeing a lot more authors getting a lot more traction to write about diversity these days.
Was there ever a book or TV show or a movie that you remember experiencing and then thinking to yourself like, wow, this is the first time I've ever seen myself in such a big way portrayed in pop culture? Because I know for me, as a Mexican American, it was definitely the Selena biopic. And so I'm always kind of curious if other people have that touchstone as well.
No, I have not. I used to feel a little self-conscious saying this, but it is the truth that Felix Ever After was the first time I really saw myself represented with all of my different intersectional identities as a Black, queer, trans person. And Lark and Kassim, Lark is the first like non-binary neurodivergent Black person. And so I feel like I myself am kind of like paving my own way by creating characters where I get to see myself reflected, knowing that there are people who need to see themselves reflected in these characters too.
Speaking to that representation, queer literature has always been around, but it seems like it's really been rising in popularity in mainstream media over the course of the last few years. For example, the New York Times reported earlier this year on the rise in popularity of LGBTQ romance. We have a quote from their article here. It says, according to NPD BookScan, which tracks the sales of most printed books sold in the United States, about 850,000 LGBTQ romance books sold at traditional retail outlets in 2021, a 740% increase over a 5-year period and more than double the amount sold in 2020. So I'm wondering, what would you say are the biggest contributors to that rise in popularity? It's pretty significant.
Yeah, I think that these stories have always been around, but like I was saying before, I was writing queer fan fiction. So I was kind of like writing behind the scenes, and there were people that were writing their own original work that were queer also and had like trans characters also. But really the difference is that traditional publishing was just slow. It was just kind of like slow on the uptake. And I think I used to work in publishing, so I used to be around like the sort of conversations that would happen where it's like, this identity is too niche. There aren't going to be enough readers for it. So we're not going to sell it in a big way. We're not going to give it the marketing it needs. And so then it kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy where the book then does not do very well because nothing was put behind it. So what I think the real difference is that there were people who started to prove, like authors who started to prove that their books could sell well. And then because of that, publishers began to see, oh, this is making big money. And we saw like something similar happen with Angie Thomas and The Hate U Give. I feel like that paved a very big opening way for a lot of Black authors. And I think Adam Silvera and Becky Albertalli, like they were kind of like published around the same time. That's when you started to see like a bigger opening of, oh, like traditional publishing being able to say, oh, this is making money. So I guess this is a route that we can now take.
Has social media helped at all with pushing that narrative as well? Because, like, for example, we've talked before about books like Red, White, and Royal Blue, for example, on this show, and just hearing about how our listeners then read those books as a result of like what we do on here, or seeing like book talk reviewers talk about, queer literature as well, and like seeing that get numbers. Does all that kind of factor into how publishing decides what to push forward and what's worth taking a chance on?
I myself have had to take a major step back from social media because as a person with multiple intersecting identities, I do think that from what I've seen, unfortunately, from what I've seen, the more marginalized you are, the more work you have to do to push your own books in kind of like the social media way. And I do think that a lot of traditional publishing has started to rely on marginalized people kind of like doing the work of the traditional publishing house, where as like white, cis, straight people tend to kind of like get a bigger push kind of automatically without needing to rely on social media. So I myself have had to take a major step back. So I don't feel like I would be able to answer quite the way, I wouldn't be able to say like what conversations are like on Book Talk, for example, right now, because I'm like making a concerted effort to not look at that.
That's totally fair.
Yeah. I was going to say, good for you. Social media is a dumpster fire.
It really is.
Yeah, like I'm addicted to Twitter, and also I'm like, I need to get off Twitter. This is too much for me. But yeah, and I think, as a gay person myself, I think I started reading gay fiction a few years ago, and it was just so nice to see myself represented in these stories, of course. It just feels good. And even like I go into bookstores these days, and I'm seeing LGBTQ books at the front of the store, just very prominently displayed. Seeing stores like Barnes & Noble proudly show off these books right at the front of the store really, I think, shows how far we've come in the past 10, 15 years. So continuing on with this, the rise in popularity, I presume authors have always wanted to get these types of books out there, but maybe publishers were hesitant and skeptical, like you were saying, about their potential popularity. Do most publishers perk up now, as far as when an author has a queer novel to pitch these days?
I don't know. I used to work in publishing, so I would be able to say maybe like 5 years ago. I do think that, when I was there, there were more conversations. I was able to literally point to the book that had hit the list and say, hey, I would really love to edit this book. And this book just hit the list and it has queer main characters. So you can no longer try to tell me that this book is not this type of book with these type of characters are not going to sell. I do think that that helped like 5 years ago. These days, I'm not sure what the conversations might be like behind the scenes.
Obviously, you're doing amazing work in terms of the stories that you're sharing with the world. And, you know, we talked a little bit about the boom and some of these other books that have really kind of blown up on the main stage. But I'm wondering, since there's always more work to be done in terms of diversifying things, what kind of stories would you like to see more of, or would you like to see readers gravitating more towards?
Definitely more intersectional identity. I think that the communities that I surround myself with are all very like BIPOC, QB BIPOC, like queer, trans, people of color. And I think that there's kind of like a conversation happening within my communities and for myself as well, as like, we're so excited to see queerness more accepted, but it is a very specific kind of queerness that's very like white, that's very cis, and kind of in that way still kind of leans into heteronormativity in a way that I think my queer communities reject. And we are hoping to see more of representation that looks like us too.
Yeah. Great point. And speaking of movies, we were excited to learn a couple years ago that Felix Ever After, your book, is being adapted by Amazon. Congrats. That is very cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been able to be involved behind the scenes on that? What's that experience been like so far?
I've seen just some slight movement, but I'm not really, I don't think I'm allowed to say very much
Okay, fair
about
enough.
it. Yeah. But I was really over the moon excited by that deal. And I'm excited for when it eventually comes out.
Very cool. Speaking of Felix Ever After, so let's turn to that book for a moment. I just wanted to bring up that you actually last year removed references to Harry Potter in light of J.K. Rowling's transphobic remarks from reprints of Felix Ever After, which I thought was an epic decision and so interesting because I'm not in the publishing industry. I don't follow it super closely, but I imagine it's not common for books to remove things after they've already printed a number of editions. Tell us about that decision to remove Harry Potter references from Felix Ever After.
Yeah, it was actually a difficult decision because I myself was in a very kind of like processing headspace of like J.K. Rowling really meant a lot to me when I was younger. Harry Potter really meant a lot to me. So for her to become so violent, like for me, words are violence, and the kind of like physical violence that she inspires with her words against my community, against people that I love. It just took a lot of like emotional processing. So I feel like even as it came out more and more that she was super transphobic, and the book had come out, like there was still a waiting period of me trying to figure out how I actually felt about this. And it was actually a foreign publisher that asked that I removed all the Harry Potter references from Felix Ever After. Yeah, because it hadn't been published yet. So then that sparked me thinking, I would love to remove the references, but also I would really love to remove the references from all books, not just from that one foreign publisher.
Yeah.
Or that one foreign edition, I should say. So it will be removed from the future reprints, like you said.
That's really great. Can you say which foreign publisher?
I want to say it was Germany.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just interesting in general that a publisher would actually suggest this first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just have to say that it's extremely powerful. I mean, you mentioned J.K. Rowling being super important to you as a child, and I think that resonates for a lot of readers who have been disappointed and disenfranchised. But for you to publish your own work and say, you know what, this bit that I was, maybe paying an homage to Harry Potter, I'm taking that back now.
Yeah.
You don't get that anymore. I just think that's extremely powerful. So definitely commend you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I feel like as I was doing the emotional processing, I realized I was thinking a lot about how I felt, but not enough about how the readers felt and how like I wanted Felix Ever After to be a safe space for trans people, but how could it be a safe space if J.K. Rowling was mentioned throughout?
Absolutely.
Right.
You have a new book coming out, which we're very excited for, called Lark and Kassim Start a Revolution. I wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit more about what we can expect as readers, since, you know, we don't have the luxury of knowing how things are going to unfold over on that end until September.
Yeah, I am very excited about this book. So it is about Lark, who's a non-binary 17-year-old aspiring writer, neurodivergent as well, who believes that the only way to be published is to have an enormous number of followers on Twitter. So they are aiming for 50,000 followers. And their former best friend, kind of like rival Kassim, accidentally posts on Lark's Twitter page about an unrequited crush or love. And then Lark freaks out because it's like, oh no, if I take it back and tell the truth, everyone's going to think that I did this on purpose and I will lose my followers. And this kind of like announcement of love goes super viral, so gets Lark a lot of attention. And it has my favorite trope of like the oblivious main character not realizing that the person is in love with them. So like the scene's post is very obviously about Lark, and everyone is like, Lark, Kassim is in love with you. And Lark is like, no, he's not. What are you talking about? So anyway, I really love this book. It really goes a lot into kind of like the social media world that I experienced as a writer, a bit of what we were talking about before. And it goes a lot into kind of like what self-love actually looks like and what actionable self-care looks like and how accountability can be a part of that.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Yeah. Just as you were talking about it, I was thinking to myself, like, man, this is like so relevant to, I think, how a lot of creatives feel. Like, maybe the only way I can open doors for myself is to figure out how to create a platform for myself on the internet. Do you often pull inspiration from the things that you experience in your own life for your books? Or do you like look for other avenues for inspiration?
Yeah, everything is inspired by my life. For the kind of like the craft of writing with the story arc of like character arc, there usually are characters who kind of like make mistakes and have to learn lessons, and that becomes like the theme of the story. So every theme and every kind of like message of the books are something that's pulled from my own life and something that I've learned or kind of like questions I've been asking myself. So this one's very much so inspired by my own experiences.
Well, I'm wondering if you can maybe give us a little bit of a tease for something. Is there a character or a specific scene that you're most looking forward to readers getting to in the book?
Yeah, there is a character named Sable. She is a Black girl who really understands kind of like also neurodivergent, the hatred that she has been shown in this world. And she has found like a really quiet, powerful self-love that I myself aspire to and that Lark aspires to. And she's also Kassim's girlfriend. So there enters a conversation of polyamory that I think a lot of young people want to see a little bit more representation for too.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I think that I just thinking of my cousins and some of my siblings as well who are Gen Z, I feel like a lot of these topics are so much more openly discussed by the younger generation, which is really kind of leading the charge in a way that we as millennials maybe like we're only like starting to dip our toes into or couldn't like fathom ever seeing on the main stage as well. So I'm sure that there are a number of people are going to be so excited to read more about that in your book as well. How is the process like writing your newest book, and how is it different from the past books that you've written?
This one was very different because originally a part of the spark of wanting to write this book was wanting to write about the pandemic in the year 2020. So originally the book was kind of like set as day one, Lark wakes up and on the radio, there's kind of like news of a mysterious illness that's spreading and they don't know what's coming yet. But as I wrote, I really felt like, especially when it came time to lockdown and quarantine, that it was kind of impossible for the characters to actually interact in any meaningful way. So what was originally written ended up kind of being like an extremely detailed outline for this current version, which does go into the pandemic. They are still in the pandemic as we are now, but it isn't specifically about the year 2020. So I think that process was very different from all the other books that I've written.
Are they getting together physically in person or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Masks
So
on, basically kind of like a vague setting of where we are right now without like a specific date or timeline. But
I see. Okay. So no like Zoom calls and then all of a sudden it cuts off and then the relationship is ruined or something. They hung up on me. No. The connection just dropped, I swear.
None of that.
Your internet connection is unstable.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed that you were able to finesse that though, because and obviously like a lot of things such as books or TV shows that are like where they explicitly state like this is the year that this story takes place in. Obviously, like the wheels were in motion for stuff like that before we knew what was coming in 2020 and stuff. But it does kind of take you out of the experience a little bit. Like I watched, I know like at least like one show during the pandemic where it's like it's 2020 and everybody is like touching, and nobody has masks on, and the kids are still in school. It's like, this is like an alternate universe. I really do commend you for pivoting, but still kind of making something that has like all of these relevant touchstones, which is also not steeped in like, we're all going to die, doom and gloom. Let's go get vaxxed before the world ends. So
what do you hope readers take away from Lark and Kassim's story when they pick up the book this September?
I hope that that the story might resonate in terms of learning that everyone is always worthy of love, even if mistakes are made, even if there are things that you need to learn and grow, and that we're all worthy of having that space to learn and grow as human beings. And that accountability is a form of self-love and self-care.
Well said. So Lark and Kassim Start a Revolution is out September 27th. And Kacen, where can our listeners find you online?
Oh, well, we've been talking about social media and how much. I do have a Twitter that I post kind of like updates for my books on. So that's Kacen Callender, like twitter.com/Kacen Callender. And then my website is kacencallender.com.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll have links, listeners, in our show notes. So, Kacen, thanks so much for joining us today. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Kacen for making the time to speak with us. And everyone, please check out Kacen's books. The best place to start is by going to their website, kacencallender.com. And again, we have a link in the show notes.
Well, moving on from our great conversation with Kacen to our next topic, there's really no graceful way to transition this because we are going to chat once again about gun safety and our desire for gun reform on this show. Between the horrific shootings in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas, we felt like we had to revisit the conversation. We've had the conversation so many times, but it begins to feel like after you've had this conversation so many times and after it's happened so many times that the conversation isn't advancing anything, which can get so frustrating. We hear the same talking points from people on both sides of this issue. And I like to think that we have some really logical and sensible opinions on what should be allowed with relation to guns in this country. But when you have a million high profile people saying it, when you have elected officials saying it and nothing's changing, it can become discouraging to talk about this again and again. So what we wanted to do today was look at some data to explain from a legislative point of view why these events keep happening and what you can do to help. I also wanted to make sure to call out that there were 14 mass shootings in the United States over Memorial Day weekend, just this past weekend. 9 people were killed, 60 were injured. And the Gun Violence Archive actually found that gun violence, not just mass shootings, left at least 156 people dead and 412 injured from 5 p.m. Eastern Time Friday to 5 a.m. Tuesday. That's the morning that we're recording.
I didn't even know about this site, by the way, gunviolencearchive.org.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem like an important resource, and I'm going to spend some more time exploring it. That's really helpful. Thank you.
We all should. I mean, that said, this is still very much a human conversation, and there are just so many feelings that I know that we all probably want to get off our chests. So I wanted to get some initial reactions from the panel before we start diving into some data.
Yeah. So outside of the plans that we have today, obviously this was extremely upsetting, and you just feel so angry because, to your point, Laura, things don't seem to change. Nothing budges. We're always asking, what's it going to take for something to actually change in this country? And we still don't have the answer. You know, when mass shootings happen, we always hear from the right, we need more police, more security, more guns. And this particular shooting in Uvalde flies in the face of all these arguments because there were cops there and they did nothing and they waited too long. There were locked doors and the cops decided not to go in. And now people are saying, people on the right, of course, are saying we need to harden our schools. But anybody paying attention to the details of the story know that those solutions would not be helpful. And then you think about, what about the windows? And what about outdoor recess? And what about buses? And what about coming and leaving school? The harden our schools argument is batshit insane, and shame on anyone who takes it seriously, because it just isn't going to work. Not to mention how easy it was for the shooter to get his guns. He had just turned 18 and immediately bought them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I don't want to dismiss, what happened in Buffalo, because I think the sad truth of all of this is that these mass shootings happen with such frequency that it feels like we're barely over one when we're already talking about another, which is awful. And the one in Buffalo, I was angry. I think it's hard not to be angry when stuff like this keeps happening. But there was something about Uvalde that just enraged me on a completely different level. It's so funny because I've been in journalism now for a while. And from the moment I had my first internship at a newsroom, it was at a local station, I just learned really quick how to compartmentalize, because you kind of have to do that when you're being inundated with hard news. And as a result of that, I can't remember the last time I actually cried over a mass casualty, but I was researching, for preparing to talk about it on this show, watching some interviews specifically that Anderson Cooper was doing on the ground over there in Uvalde. And I just felt the tears welling up in my eyes, which is so out of the ordinary for me when stuff like this happens, because, I'm just thinking about it in terms of not in a clinical way, but just in an effort to try and make sure that I'm prepared to do my job. I saved that for later. And it was just such a visceral reaction. I couldn't contain it. And I think it really is because not just that it happened at another school where the victims were mostly much younger, but because it happened in Texas, which is an open carry state, and they're notably very loose on their gun laws. It's very easy to obtain guns there. And just the sheer number of mistakes that law enforcement made, despite the fact that supposedly they've been trained for this. And again, Texas is an open carry state, and all we keep hearing is that if more good guys have guns, then we'll be able to prevent more casualties. And that clearly didn't work this time. And I don't know what more proof people need.
Yeah. And we also hear in times like these when the left immediately starts saying, we need gun control, we need gun reform now, we need it right now, right after the shooting happens. We hear people on the right say, oh, this is no time to politicize this. This is exactly the time, because it's the only time we as a country will actually talk about it. if a month from now the left tries to raise this, the right won't even acknowledge that the left is talking about it. The only time we can get the right to talk about it, and I know not everybody on the right, let's say, the gun-loving people on the right will talk about it or acknowledge it, is right after a shooting.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Pam, I really appreciated you mentioning, I don't want to minimize what happened in Buffalo. To me, I look at what happened in Buffalo and what happened in Uvalde as two very clear examples of mass shootings that could have been prevented through, one, just enforcing our laws, the existing gun laws that we have on the books. Domestic violence is a key predictor of somebody who is likely to engage in a mass shooting. Another thing is the shooter in Buffalo, he was motivated by a racist manifesto that he put out there. Anytime you hear of people with these kinds of motivations, it never comes out of the blue. Nobody's ever fucking surprised. And then you add on top of it, Uvalde, the good guys with guns, the cops, stood in the hallway while kids died.
And kids were calling 911 saying, come in here.
I cannot imagine how, when you're in a profession that is, your entire job is to help people and keep people safe. I don't know how you just stand out there listening to children call for help, hearing gunshots go off and just do nothing. Like, I don't know how that happens. Like, I think that a lot of people are obviously grappling with that, but it's very clear that something needs to change, and none of the procedures they have in place even work. Because if they did, then we wouldn't be talking about this in the same way.
Right. I mean, it says something that teachers throw themselves in front of their students, but the police don't.
Right.
Right.
I hope this situation knocks the Thin Blue Line, Blue Lives Matter movement down a peg. Because while I am not anti-police, I do think the Blue Lives Matter movement and the police worshiping has reached a very high level in this country. And here's a perfect example of why they are not perfect. Not to mention this happening in Texas of all places. This is don't mess with Texas. This is the tough guy state. You fuck with us, we'll fuck with you. Well, it all falls apart. Everything falls apart with the Uvalde case when it comes to police and their power and how allegedly good they are. And again, I'm not anti-police, but
no. And then also these numbers coming out of just how much money this community uses to fund their police department.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, it's what was it, like 40%? Is that accurate, Laura? Do you know?
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't have it right in front of me.
That's a lot. It was a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 40% to let this happen. And yeah, I mean, on the police note, you don't have to be anti-police. You don't have to have a strong stance on the police one way or the other in order to be pro common sense gun laws. As a matter of fact, if you are very pro the police, you should care, because so many police officers die in the line of fire because of the amount of guns that are in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. Mm-hmm. I mentioned domestic violence a little bit earlier. Answering domestic violence calls, those are some of the most dangerous calls for police officers to take. And so many officers die answering those calls because of gun violence. The two are intrinsically linked, and it's just so baffling to me that people who claim to be so pro the police want to make it easy for bad guys with guns to kill the police, because that's what's happening. It's just, the argument falls apart no matter what angle you take with it. But that's why I really wanted us to look at a different angle of this conversation today than what we've discussed before. Credit to Vox, who came out with a great article that synthesized a lot of these publications. That's Vox, VOX, not FOX for anyone. who might be wondering. So diving right in, the Journal of Public Economics found some really interesting, they had some really interesting findings in a 2020 study of state legislatures' policy reactions in the wake of mass shootings. What they found is that in states with Republican-controlled legislatures, a mass shooting roughly doubles the number of laws enacted that loosen gun restrictions in the year following the mass shooting. And they go on to say that they find no significant effect of mass shootings on laws enacted where there is a Democrat-controlled legislature. So the upshot is, in states with Republican-controlled legislatures, the laws get looser. In states with Democratic-controlled legislatures, nothing happens. They don't even move it in the right direction. These are both problems. The authors of this study examined every piece of gun legislation passed between 1989 and 2014 and compared what happens in the year following a mass shooting versus what happens in a, quote, normal legislative session. And ultimately, what they found is that a mass shooting in the previous year increases the number of enacted laws that loosen gun restrictions by about 120% in states with Republican-controlled legislatures. 120%.
Yeah, that is stomach turning, especially because the first thought I have is like, of course they loosen the laws because people are scared. They'll go out and buy more guns and then everybody makes money. Yay. You know?
And we've seen statistics to back that up. Every time there is a mass shooting, gun sales rise because people get scared. They think it's going to happen to them.
Yep.
This is all very good information for the NRA because they only stand to benefit every time there is a mass shooting. Not only do gun sales rise, but as Laura is explaining to us, the number of laws that loosen gun restrictions increase. So you can see why the NRA spends so much time, effort, and money investing in Republicans who will support them.
Yeah, and it's been going on for the last couple of decades. That's how intrinsic it is, and that's how hard it's going to be to unravel. A couple of examples I wanted to point to about Republican-controlled state legislatures loosening gun restrictions. Texas, since we're talking about Texas right now, in the wake of the Sandy Hook mass shooting, again, another school shooting in which about 20 little children were murdered. In the wake of that shooting, Texas passed a law that permitted trained staff members at Texas schools to secretly carry weapons to defend the school and the students. This policy was actually expanded to allow more people to participate in 2018 following a shooting at another Texas high school.
I never understand the whole "we need more guns" argument because it's just like, do you want the whole country to become militarized and we're all carrying around guns so we can protect ourselves in movie theaters and grocery stores and wherever at a public park? Like, where does it end? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
There's so much extra effort instead of just pulling back the number of guns in this country.
Unfortunately, there's no way to, I'm not going to say there's no way. That sounds very fatalistic, but there are more guns in this country than there are people. There are enough guns in this country for every man, woman, and child to have at least one. It is going to be extremely hard to get all of these excess guns off the streets.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a multi-pronged approach to addressing this. I don't know what that is. There are people smarter, more organized, and better prepared than, us on this panel who can speak to that. And we're going to talk about some of the organizations that you can look to for, information, as well as if you want to make financial contributions to assist in a little bit. But I thought, given the fact that we now know the pattern, we know the pattern in the wake of a mass shooting is for, in the year following it, for a Republican-controlled state legislature to start introducing laws or start proposing laws in the state legislature that will further loosen gun restrictions. So I'm going to give us all a little bit of homework here, and that includes our listeners. If you live in a state, particularly a state with a Republican-controlled state legislature, watch what they do over the next year. Just watch what they do. In Ohio right now, I believe their state senate just introduced a bill very similar to what we're talking about in Texas that would allow certain staff members at public schools to carry guns. Pay attention to what your state legislatures are doing. So much of the damage that is being done on this issue is at the state level. So that's the first thing we need to do. The second thing we need to do, and this is going to hurt, but we have to confront a hard truth. Pro-gun advocates are just more engaged with the political process, and they are better at organizing than pro-gun reform advocates. They are better at it than we are. A political scientist named Kristen Goss at Duke University did a little bit of digging and researching into why this happens. She's put out a couple of publications in recent years where she compared the political activities of pro-gun rights citizens and activists to those who favor gun regulations. So there's some noteworthy information that comes out of her research. The NRA, we talk about how they're an extremely effective fundraising machine. They own a lot of Republican politicians. They have them in their back pocket. But I thought it was really interesting to look at how does the NRA foster such a deep level of engagement and commitment amongst their members? And there are a few reasons why. They provide tangible benefits to their members. So NRA members can buy surplus military weapons that they can't buy anywhere else.
Great.
Because why you need a surplus military weapon, I don't fucking know. Not only can they do that through the NRA, they can get them at discounted rates. They also get to participate in government-subsidized gun clubs and shooting competitions. And they also get discounts on goods and services for gun hobbyists. They also just get the sense of fellowship with other gun advocates. What do we have on the side of, pro-gun reform that matches this?
Right. We need benefits.
Well, but it's like, what's the benefit? Your kid doesn't get shot when they go to school.
Right.
Like,
you need something tangible.
But it
free
seems
coffee.
Like that seems like that should be a good motivator.
But that's not something tangible. Like, it is, but it's not like, it's unlikely that your kid will be shot at a school. So it has to be something more enticing, like a gun is to pro-gun advocates. I don't really have the answer for that, but I think that's
either.
a really, I don't know, discounted internet.
Yeah, I mean, like,
team up with Comcast.
Here's the thing. This is obviously not anything that you would see more than once, but I know that California has had some success in gun buyback programs. They actually just had one in the wake of what happened in Uvalde out in Sacramento, and they were giving out $50 gas gift cards as an incentive for people to come and turn their guns in. And it was such a popular event that they ended up running out of these gas gift cards that they had, preloaded for anybody that came through. And so, maybe if people need to see some kind of monetary incentive instead, that might be a good place to start. But it's like Laura said, it's probably going to have to be something bigger than that. Although gas prices are on the rise, so maybe the time is now to really, hit people with something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah, and other states and countries have had major buyback programs, including Australia. I shared an article with you too, I think, the other day. They bought back 650,000 legally owned guns after a shooting in 1996. I think
shooting.
people are willing to do it.
Yeah.
A shooting.
A shooting.
Yeah.
What must that be like?
You know, this seems kind of messed up to say, but maybe inflation will drive some people to sell their guns. Whereas
that's what I'm
otherwise
wondering.
wouldn't have.
Especially because, when you look at the reasons why people choose to give up their guns at these buyback events that, my state does, a lot of people cite inability to safely store the weapons at home, which is very important, especially if you have children, or
God, I
lack
can't
of
imagine.
knowledge
Yeah.
for how to use them. Like I think I've said this before on the show. My grandpa has some hunting rifles. We know that he has them. We have never seen them in the house. I don't know where he keeps them to this day, but he keeps those very safely hidden, and their house is not that big.
How about and I'm pretty serious when I say this, team up with Amazon's Ring home security system and be like, trade in your gun, we'll get you a free home security system and a baseball bat. Isn't that why people have guns? They're afraid somebody's going to break in the middle of the night. It's not really for the movie theater, for the school. I don't think. I think the large majority of people are concerned. I'm concerned about somebody breaking in the middle of the night. Is that ever going to happen? No, but I live in fear all the time.
But you
so I have a home security
roll with a baseball
system.
bat near your bed, and
You know what though? This is where I come out as, I grew up in the South, y'all. I didn't grow up around guns. My family never had them, but I grew up around people who did. And I know plenty of people who have a single personal weapon used for, self-defense purposes only. Those aren't the people going out and shooting up schools and grocery stores.
Right.
So I don't think that's who we're targeting here.
Yeah, but this is just about, for me, taking guns off the streets.
Yeah.
Just having less guns out there. And I know the other factor is that to a lot of people, it's not necessarily just home security. It's about, this is a symbol of freedom in America.
Yep.
Unfortunately, this is the thought that goes through people's heads. Second Amendment.
which is
Gotta
wild
have my
because
gun. It's freedom.
when those laws were written, when the Second Amendment was written, it was not written with the idea in mind that normal everyday civilians would have access to semi-automatic rifles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So-
Or any kind of large capacity magazine.
Right.
They had no concept of that shit.
Mm-hmm. They're talking
Yeah.
probably about a musket, right?
Yeah.
Or as Family Guy said, they were talking about literal bear arms. Just bear arms. The arms of a bear.
Well, what I think is interesting, and you are both touching on this point, is that the population of people who look at gun ownership as a Second Amendment right, having a gun just for the sake of having a gun, they're actually a pretty small minority, a very vocal minority, but compared to the rest of the country, if you start looking at numbers of support for sensible gun reform, the vast majority of Americans support some kind of gun restrictions and gun regulations. And yet, the NRA and other pro-gun groups just continue out fundraising the pro-gun regulation groups. They have started closing the gap after Sandy Hook. A number of, gun control organizations cropped up. Some of them already existed. But even after Sandy Hook, this is in 2016, 3 years after Sandy Hook, or 4 years after Sandy Hook, the NRA and 3 other major gun rights groups touted a combined revenue of $437 million. By contrast, the same year, the 6 prominent gun violence prevention groups had a combined revenue of $95 million.
Damn. It's a religion in a lot of ways.
It is.
In
it's
that
fanatical.
people... Yeah, exactly.
It's fanatical. And then to really drive home how fanatical it is, Goss also found, when looking at engaged political activism in the wake of Sandy Hook, that pro-gun rights men were by far the most likely to engage in political activism in the months after Sandy Hook. That's calling their representatives, joining local town halls, posting on the internet, making political contributions, and of course, buying guns. They were by far more active than anyone else. And this is where I say, this is our second piece of homework. We got to step up and we got to be better.
Yeah.
We can't get super active for, a week or a month following a mass shooting. It has to be a sustained drumbeat or else it's not going to work.
I want to say yeah, but how do we do that? Where is that sustained drumbeat going to come from?
And we can talk about that in a minute, but you had a point here from David Hogg that you wanted to share. I just wanted
to give everybody a little bit of hope. So like we've been talking about, it seems like we talk about this for a week or two and then everybody forgets until the next mass shooting. David Hogg, who is a founder and board member at March for Our Lives, he was one of the students at Stoneman Douglas School when they experienced a mass shooting. He's amassed a major following now since he is a founder of March for Our Lives. He tweeted this video from Houston of a protest out front of the NRA convention that occurred over the weekend. And he said, yeah, this time is going to be different. So I don't feel as optimistic as he does, but he's been dedicating his life to this. And since he's living and breathing this every day and he thinks things are going to be different now, that gives me a little bit of hope. But like I said, I'm still not so sure.
What does give me hope is that the kids who had to grow up with active shooter drills are adults now, at least the first generation of them.
Yeah.
So they will be voting.
Who can vote? Mm-hmm. That is a good point.
I was going to ask you too, because we in a different way we did grow up in the shadow of Columbine. Did your schools have active shooter drills? Because we did, but not as frequently as earthquake drills, which is interesting because I know Columbine really kind of shocked the nation as well.
My school had one active shooter drill after Columbine. I was in 5th grade and didn't really experience active shooter drills. We did have, when I was in middle school after 9/11, we had a couple of bomb drills because bomb threats were called into the school. That's a different kind of trauma, but it's nothing compared to, my experience is nothing compared to what kids are going through today.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think we had some of those drills because I vaguely remember hiding in a corner of the room that you couldn't see from the door window, shutting the window blinds, stuff like that, and maybe being under the desk. If we did have those active shooter training drills, they were not very frequent.
Yeah. And they never called them. I don't know what they call them for kids these days, but I'm sure that most kids know about stuff like this, unfortunately. I think for us, they just called them stranger on campus drills or something.
Yeah.
So it was very much a euphemism. So I think to your point, Laura, it's much more poignant for children nowadays in terms of all these drills they have to go through because all of this keeps happening over and over again. So
yeah. It's heartening to know that the kids who have been put through this are so politically engaged, but they can't do it on their own. So all of us have to be part of the solution. And to your point, Andrew, what can we do? What are some tangible steps that regular people can take, even if it's just a small step here and there? If everybody is taking a small step together, then it really, really will help. Where I really want everyone to focus, at least to start, is, like I said, watching your state legislature and be engaged frequently. We're going to put a link in the show notes to where you can find out how to contact your state legislature and how to watch what it is that they are working on and what is advancing to consideration, because this is where a lot of loosen gun restrictions come in is at the state level, and we got to keep an eye on it. You can also join a local gun violence prevention group and remain engaged with the group over time, even if that means going to an occasional meeting. I know a lot of these are meeting over Zoom now, so you don't even have to leave your house a lot of the time. And I know a lot of them also have newsletters and different ways that you can stay engaged with social media. So there's a lot of different ways that you can be engaged with these groups, depending on your own personal preferences of like whether you physically go there or you stay at home. And if you can, also donate to one of the national gun reform organizations. Some of the prominent ones are Everytown for Gun Safety, Brady Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, and Sandy Hook Promise, although there are more. The other thing I would say is, and I know it's obvious, but vote in every election. I know, federal elections are sexy and there's a lot of buzz around presidential elections, but your local elections are, I think, very underrated. People don't think about the impact that state and local elections have on their lives. A lot of politics is local, so we all need to be involved in that. And speaking of local politics,
well,
Andrew.
Yeah, before I mention that, though, we have the primaries coming up here in Nevada. Voting starts in just a week or two, and you can bet I will not be voting for the people who are wielding their guns during the fucking television commercials. Even after the shootings, they're showing off their guns. It makes me sick to my stomach. But yes, so volunteer to help those who are running in the midterms, like Beto, who is running for the Senate in Texas. I actually volunteered to text for Beto, just to be clear, after seeing him crash Governor Abbott's press event in Texas last week. That was pretty epic, and the response from the Republicans who were up on stage was quite interesting to see how worked up they were over Beto interrupting what Abbott had to say. So I've texted for Biden. I did that leading up to the 2020 election. It was very easy to do. You do it from home. They give you these tools. They walk you through it. It feels good to help out in that way. I would much rather text instead of call. And people read their text messages. They pay attention to the text messages. It's easy to ignore a phone call, not easy to ignore a text message. So texting for these people who are running, whether it's presidential election, Senate, etc., it can be very effective. So don't shrug off the idea of texting for a campaign.
Absolutely. Such a good call out. And similar here in Georgia, I'm volunteering for Stacey Abrams, as well as our, Democrats up and down the ballot here in Georgia. So just being prepared to be engaged in any way that, you're able, that makes you comfortable. It can be really daunting when you're just trying to live life and you're working, and maybe you've got a couple jobs to try and make ends meet, and it can feel really daunting to be engaged, and you can end up wondering, how am I going to be able to do anything impactful when I'm just trying to keep my own shit together? It can feel really intimidating, but I promise some of these steps that you can take are really, really small and won't take too much of your time. I think it's imperative that even if you do something that takes 10 minutes of your time, there's power in numbers, and we need the numbers here because we've got them. We've just got to make them engaged numbers. That's what's going to make the difference. And just to wrap up, for anyone wondering how they can support victims of the Uvalde and Buffalo attacks, we'll have links to some verified fundraisers for Uvalde and for Buffalo on GoFundMe. And also wanted to wrap up by mentioning that the show is going to be donating $500 each to the Buffalo Survivors Fund, as well as the Texas Elementary School Shooting Victims Fund, both through GoFundMe. So you can look at either one of those fundraisers. There are also a number of verified fundraisers that you can look at as well. And we encourage everyone to take a look and make a donation if you can.
Yeah, and thank you to our listeners for supporting us, of course, because we wouldn't be able to make these donations without the support that we receive from you in all ways that there are to support us. So, well, on that note, thank you, Laura, for enlightening us, as you always do, with this information, and let's hope that we can keep up the momentum this time. I saw that David Hogg actually, even today, he said, "Whoa, I can't believe who just DM'd me on Twitter. This time is different." So
I hope so.
Maybe.
I hope so, too.
Because we're all so sick and tired of this.
Hey, we got to have hope. If we don't hold on to hope, we don't have anything.
Yeah. So let's lighten things up a little bit. In a couple minutes from now, you might be wondering how I could say this is lightening things up. But like I said, we went to Tahoe for my birthday, and we were coming back last Sunday. And we did a road trip. It was about an 8-hour drive. And about 4 hours into the drive, we were in Tonopah, Nevada. It's exactly in the middle of Tahoe and Vegas. It's in the middle of nowhere, small desert town. People would maybe write it off if it weren't for the fact that it is home to a international clown motel. And that is as creepy and terrifying as you can imagine. Yes, a heavily clown-themed motel in the middle of the desert. So we're driving through this little town, and we start approaching what looks like a car accident. And there's already police on the scene, and it looks like they had been working the scene for a little while already. And don't worry, the clowns aren't going to pop out of nowhere. That's not where this story is going. But as we approach this car accident, one of the police tells me to stop my car so that a car coming from the opposing direction can make a U-turn. Meanwhile, there's another car to our right, pulled over on the side of the road, and the driver is standing outside of the car, and I presume that driver was somehow involved in this accident that's also that the police are investigating. So the police stops us, and the police officer then signals the car coming from the opposite direction to make its U-turn. Instead of making the U-turn, the car just makes a left turn and accelerates into the guy who is standing outside of his car, and he runs this guy over.
What?
This is happening the fuck in front of us. This guy who's getting run over, he kind of jumps up a little bit, lands on the windshield, does this like backflip over this guy's fucking car. Of course, the cops are right there. We're right there. We have front row seats to this fucking thing. We're shook. You know, people throw that word around, but we were shook. We could not believe what we were seeing. The cops pull out their tasers. I thought this was a gun situation. I'm like, go, grab your gun. I'm like, you know, in the split second, I'm like, what the hell do I do? Do I drive away? We decided to drive away because I was concerned for our safety. Like, this guy just purposely ran another guy down. I was afraid it was going to be a shootout or something.
Oh my goodness.
So,
holy shit.
Yeah, I know. So we start driving away. We're like, what the fuck? I'm like, holy shit. My car has a dash cam. It just filmed that whole thing. It's perfect video of the whole thing. I have the video. Do you guys want to see the video?
No way.
You don't have to see it, but I'm going to offer it to you if you want to see it.
I thought that you were going to say that it turned out it was a bit the whole time. Like,
no.
I mean, are you turning that video over to like the local PD?
So I forgot to add something important. This guy who was hit did immediately get up. He wasn't, you know, dead on the scene or something like that. He did have blood coming out of his face, but he did immediately get up. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sharing this story right now. So yeah, we get to our next stop. I called the police back there. And I was like, I have video of this. Do you want it? And the operator's like, when did this happen? And I was like, oh, about 2 hours ago. She's like, 2 hours ago? I was like, the cops are already there. I didn't need to call it in immediately, you know? But my theory is that this person who got run over, you know, was somehow involved in the accident. This guy who did the running over, who tried to, I guess, murder this person, was angry at the person for somehow being involved in the accident. But just I still cannot believe like the perfect timing of it. Like the police told us to stop. It happened right in front of us. Like, what are the chances of that? So, yes, I did turn it over to the sheriff.
Wow.
Happy birthday.
I know.
Like, you know, you like see that online sometimes, somebody getting hit by a car, but you never see it right in front of you. And again, the chances of that happening. So, yeah, that was a interesting birthday for sure.
When something like that happens, I always feel like, did that really just happen in front of me?
Yeah. We were like shaking.
Yeah.
We couldn't believe it. So now I'm like, oh my God, what if I get like summoned to court to testify and I got to go back to Tonopah, Nevada, and they're going to be like, sorry, the Comfort Inn's booked. You have to stay at the International Clown Motel.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. Can I like...
No.
Hang on. I want to look up this International Clown Motel.
I know.
Is it a motel or a hotel?
Oh, it's a motel. The Clown Motel USA, America's scariest motel. This is where this happens. Miles from America's, the world famous.
Let's see. Let's look at their things to do.
Die. Be run over.
Well, they have a cemetery tour.
Oh, perfect. They have a whole like clown exhibit.
They have a rodeo.
A clown rodeo.
Oh man, can I get you like a gift card or something?
I dare you. I might stay if you buy me a gift card. I'll go back and like, you know, pay my respects to where the incident happened.
You could
They
vlog
actually have
it for Patreon exclusive.
They also have a what they call an international car forest, and international is in this name, and it's like Cadillac Ranch in Texas, but it's way more cars and buses, and they're like sticking out of the ground. It's really cool for pictures. So the other thing I just wanted to mention is that for my birthday, I got a Oculus Quest from Pat and my parents and his parents. This is a virtual reality headset from Facebook. This is the one that the metaverse is going to happen in if Mark Zuckerberg gets his way. And there's lots of apps, but there's also many games as well, including this one called Beat Saber. And it's like Guitar Hero, but you have like lightsabers and you're moving them in the directions that it tells you to big music. So like there's a Lady Gaga pack, so I'm like doing Born This Way to with Beat Saber. It's
so
really
cool.
fun. Yeah. There's also a mini golf one. I have to say, I have been skeptical of virtual reality in general, but now using the Oculus Quest, I get it. It works really well. It does feel immersive. Playing mini golf, like you can walk around the hole, you can crouch down and look at the hill on the course to see which way you should shoot. You get that satisfying sound of a putt, the satisfying sound of the golf ball going in the hole. Like, it is really cool. Have you two done virtual reality before, like the headset stuff?
Once, and it made me sick.
Yeah,
I haven't either, but I'm concerned that it would also make me sick. I mean, I get sick in the car, so
yeah. Like you, I get motion sickness very easily, and I can only play this for like 20-30 minutes. But since the video quality is so good and it is so responsive, it's not like laggy, I think that helps prevent you from getting motion sickness. I'm evolving on virtual reality. I get it now. I don't want Mark Zuckerberg's multiverse, the metaverse to be the future. I did walk into his metaverse, and you can like walk up to people and actually talk to real humans. And it's bizarre, to say the least. I figure like, okay, now that I have this virtual reality headset, it's a nice backup plan for life. Like if Earth gets any worse than it already is, I can just escape to the metaverse and just never leave.
Sounds like Ready Player One.
I was going to say,
Where's Andrew today for the podcast? Oh, he's in the metaverse right now. Sorry, y'all.
No, we're just going to have to record in the metaverse.
right, exactly.
That would be fun. Actually, doing it with friends would be a lot of fun. I know a couple people do have these headsets, but I haven't interacted with them yet. So yeah, if you've been vaguely interested in virtual reality, maybe check out the Oculus Quest. I also got this message from Laura. Send me the video. So I guess we're not playing the video, right? I'll send it to you in Slack.
the people watching the live stream should get a choice. You know?
Fair. Okay.
should.
Do you want to watch it live right now?
No, because
somebody said
wanna-
no video in the Discord.
I'm sending it to both of you
Okay,
in a private Slack channel.
I'm so scared.
All right, there you go. Laura's watching it now. Her hand is covering her face.
What? Oh my God.
Right? This guy gets hit and flies over the car.
Now I'm shaking.
Yeah. We're front row to this.
Oh, and this is broad daylight.
Broad daylight.
When you told the story, I thought it was nighttime.
It's like 12 p.m. And Pat pointed this out to me. When you watch it, you notice this guy does accelerate into the person.
Yeah.
And the person, before he's hit, you can almost tell he wants to confront him, I think, because he's like signaling to him. Oh, Pam just saw it too.
Oh my God. I can't believe that.
I can't believe that happened in front of you.
I know.
I'm so glad that guy got up. Like,
Yeah.
My
Clearly he
favorite
was
is definitely
hurt.
just like you accelerating at the end and driving off. But honestly,
Me peeling out of there. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Peace, everybody.
Exactly.
I didn't drive that fast. Out of there.
But you
Andrew's
can
driving by,
definitely
like,
tell that you were
"Happy
ready to
Pride."
like get out.
I yelled happy pride. Yeah, no. I did pause for a second because I was like, but then the first thought I had was, what if there's gunfire?
Well, it's because you didn't know if that guy was going to reverse or not and hit your car.
That too. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, but like, I mean, this person is not well if they decided to just hit another person like that in front of a whole bunch of witnesses and the police. Like,
And
there's something. Yeah.
Oh, man. So the local clown motel hasn't reported on this crime yet. I have been searching the news to see if there's a report about this, but there hasn't been. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on to some recommendations now. Have you two heard about this new docuseries on Apple TV Plus called Prehistoric Planets?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is a 5 or 6 part docuseries narrated by David Attenborough, and it tells the story of dinosaurs. And what's fascinating about it is that it feels like one of those Planet Earth documentaries. The dinosaurs are really well done, and it looks like they shot all the nature around the dinosaurs actually out in Earth. So it's only the dinosaurs that have been faked. So they meshed the real world and the CGI world together to create a very convincing docuseries. You feel like you're watching a new Planet Earth documentary that was just recently shot, but obviously it wasn't because dinosaurs. And David Attenborough narrating it adds an authenticity to it that makes it feel like it's a modern day docuseries. Very cool if you're interested in dinosaurs, and maybe a good way to warm up for Jurassic World, which hits theaters in just a couple weeks.
Well, I love dinosaurs, so I'll definitely be checking that out. I wanted to recommend something on Netflix. I know that we haven't had much love for Netflix lately.
Nope.
It's not been a lot of great news to share on Netflix, but I wanted to recommend this show, The G Word, with Adam of Adam Ruins Everything fame, College Humor. This is actually a Higher Ground production that's executive produced by the Obamas. And this is essentially like a 6 or 7 episode deep dive into various government services and why they work the way they do, laid out in a very simple to understand format. And it's not only super entertaining, but also really enlightening. I learned a lot from it. So I think if, you're interested in learning more about why, the kinds of food that are available in your grocery store are available, or how governmental responses to storms or how those things work in our country. I definitely recommend checking this out because he interviews a lot of people who are working these jobs, and you really get to see, the people who are behind making the country function every day. And it's kind of amazing. For all of its faults, it is pretty amazing.
And I wanted to recommend foot soles for Converse. I really enjoy wearing Converse, but they're not always the most comfortable shoe. And this company was started by a 23-year-old who also loves wearing Converse and just wanted a more comfortable experience while they were working, standing on their feet all day at Trader Joe's. So they're specifically made to fit this type of shoe. I believe they also make inserts now specifically made for Vans if you're more of a Vans person. But yeah, these are really great. $20, and my Converse have never felt more comfy. So if you're looking to enhance your experience and you're also a Converse wearer, then I would recommend checking this out.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thanks again to Kacen Callender for joining us today. Be sure to check out their body of work at kacencallender.com. If you have any feedback about today's episode, you can write to millennialshow@gmail.com, or you can use the contact form or anonymous confessional on millennialshow.com. You can also follow us on social media. No, we will not be posting the video on our social media channels. We are Millennial Show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then over on TikTok, we are Millennial Pod. And finally, don't forget, we would love your support at patreon.com/millennial. You get years of benefits, including access to our weekly live streams, our Bay Hangouts every month, and so much more. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.